I knew something was wrong the moment my key refused to turn in the lock. Standing on the front porch of what should have been a silent, empty house, my grief-filled sanctuary, I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the late January air. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. 12 hours earlier, I had watched my husband Ethan take his final breath in the cardiac unit at St. Joseph's Hospital. Now I stood frozen, still wearing the same jeans I'd had on for 2 days, clutching a wilted bouquet of roses and lilies from his coworkers. My eyes were swollen, my lips cracked from crying and lack of sleep. All I wanted was to collapse into our bed and breathe in whatever traces of him remained on his pillow. I slid the key in again. Nothing. The lock had somehow forgotten me, or worse, rejected me. That's when I noticed the curtains weren't ours. The white linen panels I'd hemmed myself had vanished, replaced by thick velvet drapes in a garish floral pattern I would never have chosen. My stomach dropped as I peered through the narrow gap between the fabric and window frame. Inside my living room, cardboard boxes were stacked in towers where there should have been empty space. A pink velvet pillow sat in my reading chair. A floral teacup rested on the coffee table. And then I saw her. Diana, my mother-in-law, wearing a navy cardigan and sipping tea from my wedding china, the set Ethan and I had saved for 3 years to buy. Across from her, casually tossing throw blankets into a basket, was Jocelyn, Ethan's younger sister. They were laughing, moving, in as if I didn't exist, as if Ethan hadn't died just hours ago. I knocked. No answer. I knocked again, harder this time, my fists trembling and my throat raw. After what felt like forever, the door cracked open. Diana's figure filled the frame, composed and calm, arms folded tightly across her chest like she'd been preparing for this confrontation for years. "Rachel," she said, tilting her head, "didn't expect you so soon. What's going on?" My voice shook. "Why can't I open the door?" She leaned against the doorframe, perfectly poised. "Because, dear, you don't live here anymore." My mouth opened, but no sound came out. I blinked, certain I'd misheard. "Excuse me?" Diana's smile didn't waver. "Ethan paid for this house. My son, not you. There was no prenup, no child, and no real contribution on your part. It's time this house returned to his real family." The cold I felt wasn't from the weather. It was radiating from her. "I'm his wife," I whispered. "We bought this house together. I refinanced it when his business failed." "Oh, please," Diana cut me off with a dismissive wave. "You played house while he worked. Now that he's gone, your lease is up." Behind her, Jocelyn appeared with 2 of my serving plates in hand. "You left the side door unlocked when you went to the hospital," she said with a smirk. "We figured you wouldn't mind." I felt my knees wobble. A laugh escaped me, not from humor, but the hollow, stunned disbelief that bubbles up when reality breaks too sharply to bear. "What's so funny?" Diana narrowed her eyes. I steadied myself and wiped away a tear that I wasn't even sure came from sadness anymore. "You're unpacking pillows and pouring tea in a house you think belongs to you," I said slowly. "But you have no idea what you've just stepped into." The smile on Diana's face faltered just for a second. It was the only crack I needed. I turned and walked back to my car. My keys were useless now, but I had something better, something she didn't know about. And by the time I was done, Diana would wish she'd never touched a single cup in my kitchen. 2 years earlier, almost to the day, I sat at the edge of our front porch watching Ethan run his hands through his hair in frustration. It was January, then too, just colder, darker. His startup had collapsed the week before. The bank had frozen his business accounts. His credit score had tanked. I remember how he couldn't look me in the eye when he said it. They might take the house, Rachel. He wasn't a weak man, but that day I saw him cracked open in a way I never had before. It was the same house Diana now claimed belonged to the real family. I made a decision the next morning, quietly, without a word to Ethan. I got dressed, drove to the credit union, and started the refinance process. I moved the mortgage into my name, using the small nest egg I'd been saving since leaving my interior design job years earlier. I hadn't told anyone, not Ethan, not my parents, and certainly not Diana. She would have used it as proof that he'd failed as a man. The process took weeks. I picked up freelance jobs to start making the payments. Ethan never asked where the mortgage confirmations were going. He was too busy recovering, emotionally and physically. I kept things afloat, fixed the faucet, budgeted the groceries, painted the hallway. I watched our home survive on the strength of my silence. Diana, of course, never knew. She only visited on holidays, never staying long. She hated the South, thought Savannah was too humid, too soft, too forgiving. I'd hear her voice echo through the guest room. Ethan, you were meant for more than this floral wallpaper and street jazz. And Ethan would smile that tired smile and whisper to me later in bed, she just doesn't understand peace. I never wanted to confront her. Not then, not even now. I just wanted space to grieve, to be alone in the only place that still smelled like him. Instead, she changed the locks. I sat in my car outside the house for a long time after that confrontation. The January air seeped into my coat, but I didn't move. I didn't cry. It was like my body didn't even know how to react anymore. How do you process being widowed and homeless on the same day? Eventually, I drove to a motel just off Highway 204, a place that reeked of bleach and mold and something vaguely chemical. I used Ethan's emergency credit card, the only one still active, and rented a room for 3 nights. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at my bag. I hadn't packed clothes, just hospital papers, a book I never opened, and the last voicemail Ethan left me the night before his heart gave out. I played it once, twice, then shut my phone off. That night, I didn't sleep. I kept picturing Diana, sitting in my chair, Jocelyn eating off my plates, and the hallway filled with boxes of their things. They hadn't even let the body go cold before staking their claim. The next morning, Tuesday, I woke to the sound of church bells. St. Francis down the street rang them every hour. I sat up slowly, brushed the knots out of my hair, and stared at the blank motel ceiling. My fingers ached from clenching the sheets all night. My throat burned, and then I did something I never imagined myself doing. I picked up the phone and called the funeral home. "Good morning," a gentle voice answered. "St. Matthew's Memorial, this is Margaret." "Yes," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "This is Rachel Monroe. I need to update the guest list for Ethan Monroe's service." A pause. "Of course, Mrs. Monroe. What changes would you like to make?" I didn't hesitate. "Remove Diana Monroe and Jocelyn Monroe from the list." Another pause, this time longer. "Understood." I ended the call before she could ask why. It wasn't spite. It wasn't vengeance. Not yet. It was a boundary, the first one. I had drawn in over a decade of holding my tongue. And for the first time since Ethan died, I felt something that almost resembled control. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Tuesday afternoon, I returned to the house, not through the front, but by circling the block and parking discreetly behind the row of hedges that separated our backyard from the neighbors. I waited and watched. Diana's car wasn't in the driveway. No sign of Jocelyn either. The side door, the one leading from the laundry room to the back porch, had always had a faulty latch. Ethan had meant to fix it for months. I knew how to slip it open without a sound. Inside, the house smelled different. Not bad, just foreign. The lavender air fresheners I hated were everywhere. My framed photos had vanished from the hallway walls, replaced by landscape prints I didn't recognize. There was a sharp pang in my chest as I realized someone had rearranged the throw pillows on the couch. Ethan's side of the sofa was empty. No blanket, no coffee mug, no trace. I didn't have time to mourn. I moved quickly. Ethan's office was tucked in the back of the house, between the guest room and the laundry. A small, windowless room filled with wires, books, and the smell of his cologne. Diana hated that space. She called it a digital junkyard. That's why I figured she wouldn't touch it. I was right. The room was just as he'd left it, chaotic yet organized in that way only he understood. Papers stacked into columns, receipts. Half-sorted, USBs labeled in his neat all-capital handwriting. I stood in the doorway for a moment, letting the silence settle around me like a second skin. Then I went to work. Top drawer, receipts from a freelance job. Second drawer, business cards, old flash drives, and a sticky note reminding him to cancel a dentist appointment. I rifled through them all, unsure what I was looking for, just chasing a memory, or maybe a signature. Anything that could tie him, this place, and me back together. And then I saw it. A slim black folder wedged between two instruction manuals on his desk. Across the top, in his unmistakable handwriting, "Postnup, do not discard." I froze. We never signed a prenup. Not once. We married in our mid-30s, broke but in love, trusting each other implicitly. Ethan joked that paperwork ruined the romance. But a postnup? I opened the folder slowly. Inside were 3 printed pages on legal letterhead, dated 2 weeks after our second anniversary. I scanned for my name, his name, signatures, terms. And there it was, under a highlighted clause. In the event of the husband's passing, all jointly owned assets, including real estate, are to be transferred wholly to Rachel Monroe unless otherwise specified in a last will and testament. There was no will, but this was binding. At the back of the folder, I found a folded sheet of notebook paper. The handwriting was unmistakable. Ethan's casual slant, darker ink than usual. If you're reading this, it means something awful has happened. If Mom tries anything, show this to your lawyer. You know how she is. Keep this safe, Rach. My breath caught. It was the first time I'd seen his handwriting since the hospital. The curve of the R in my name, the way he still signed just E, like a note passed in class. My knees buckled and I had to sit down. I read the note twice, 3 times. My heart ached with something too complicated to name. Grief, vindication, guilt. Maybe even gratitude. Ethan knew. On some level, he knew. Diana wouldn't stop. And despite all his flaws, he had tried to protect me. The only way he knew how, I tucked the folder into my coat and left the house through the back door, just as I'd come in. That night, back at the motel, I didn't sleep again. But I didn't cry, either. Instead, I stayed up rereading the postnup until the words stopped blurring. By sunrise, I had called Angela Flores, my old college roommate turned real estate attorney, and scheduled a meeting, because now I had the paperwork. And just enough anger to use it. Wednesday afternoon arrived gray and listless, the kind of day where even the sun seemed reluctant to show up. I had just returned from my meeting with Angela, who, despite not seeing me in years, had wrapped me in a hug like no time had passed. She didn't ask how I was, just looked me in the eye and said, "We're going to make this right." I was halfway through a bowl of instant soup in the motel kitchenette when I heard it. A sharp knock at the door. 3 quick raps, the kind that carries entitlement. I opened the curtain just enough to see the outline of Diana standing outside, dressed in black like she'd walked straight out of a soap opera. Next to her was a man in a gray suit, square jaw, clipboard in hand, wedding band gleaming. Lawyer. I didn't open the door. Instead, I stepped outside, coat zipped to the chin, folder in hand. I closed the motel room behind me and met them in C. The parking lot where the wind whipped Diana's scarf sideways. Rachel, she said, smiling thinly. This is Mr. Langley, my family attorney. We're here to discuss next steps regarding the house. Next steps? I repeated, my voice even. Diana nodded like this was a real estate negotiation between civil parties, and not a home invasion staged during a funeral week. Since Ethan left no will, his estate, including the house, is subject to division among next of kin. As his mother and sister, we have legal rights. I'm his wife, I said, the only legal spouse. Mr. Langley cleared his throat, already uncomfortable. What Mrs. Monroe means is that without a clear testamentary directive, probate law permits certain— I'm so glad you're both here, I interrupted, calm but firm. Saves me a trip to your office. I held up the black folder. Diana's smile faltered. This is a notarized post-nuptial agreement, I said. Signed 3 years ago. 2 witnesses, legal letterhead. It transfers all shared assets to me, the spouse, in the event of Ethan's death. I let the silence sink in. Mr. Langley reached out. May I see that document? No, I said quickly, pulling the folder back. You'll get a copy through official channels. I've already retained counsel. Diana's expression cracked just slightly. You're bluffing, she hissed. Am I? I asked, stepping back toward my motel door. Because if I'm bluffing, you should feel confident enough to go back to your car and celebrate. But if I'm not, then you've committed trespassing, unlawful entry, and you've tampered with property that doesn't belong to you. Mr. Langley took a step away from her subtly. You don't get to win this, Diana said, her voice lower now, venom barely concealed. You were never part of our family. You stole my son from us. I tilted my head. He wasn't a trophy, I replied. He was a man. And I didn't steal him. You pushed him away the second he stopped living by your script. I didn't wait for her to reply. I turned my back and walked inside, locking the door behind me. From the window, I watched them stand in. Silence for a few seconds before Diana spun around, climbing into the passenger seat like a queen in retreat. The lawyer followed, awkward and flustered. They didn't knock again. That night, I sat on the edge of the motel bed and opened Ethan's letter again. I ran my fingers across the ink, wondering if he ever imagined how fast she'd come for me, how shameless she'd be. Maybe he had. Maybe that's why he wrote it. I didn't sleep much. The adrenaline made rest impossible. My hands kept twitching. My breath came in shallow bursts. But something inside me had shifted. I wasn't just reacting anymore. I was preparing, and the next move would be mine. By Friday morning, the motel room felt like it had absorbed my grief. The air hung heavy with stale coffee grounds and the scent of unopened sympathy cards. I sat at the rickety fold-out table sorting through funeral arrangements, music selections, eulogy notes, seating plans, when I spotted an envelope slipped under my door sometime during the night. No stamp. No return address. Just my name in computer-printed letters. I stared at it for a long moment before picking it up. Inside was a crisp document from the Chatham County Probate Court. My name appeared in bold near the top. Rachel Monroe, respondent, my pulse quickened as I read, "This court has received a formal petition filed by Mrs. Diana Monroe, mother of the late Ethan Monroe, challenging the validity of the property transfer and postnuptial agreement dated June 5th, 3 years prior. The petitioner alleges that undue influence, mental distress, and coercion may have impacted the decisions of Mr. Monroe in the months preceding his death." I stopped reading and let the paper fall to the table as if it had burned my skin. Diana was accusing me of manipulating Ethan, of controlling him while he was vulnerable, of exploiting him for his property. The rage that flooded me wasn't explosive. It was slow and hot, like molasses over flame. Steady. Final. I picked up my phone and called Angela. "I figured you'd call," she said before I could speak. "She's saying I coerced him," I said flatly. "That I forced him to sign the postnup." Angela's voice was calm, too calm. "That's not new. It's what people do when they don't have legal footing. They sling mud and hope something sticks." "She wants to take everything," I whispered. "Not just the house. She wants to rewrite who he was, who we were." "She wants control," Angela corrected. "This isn't about money, Rachel. It never was." I stared at the water stain in the corner of the ceiling, feeling the chill of motel air wrapping around my ankles. "I want to fight her," I said. "Not just stop her. I want to destroy her." Angela paused, then her tone shifted. Steel under velvet. "Good. But we do it smart. You don't speak to her. You don't respond. You let me build this like a wall, one brick at a time." After hanging up, I folded the court letter and tucked it into my suitcase. That afternoon, I received a text message from a number I hadn't seen in over a year. James Harding, Ethan's former business partner, the man who'd walked away when the startup collapsed. "Rachel, I just heard. I'm so sorry. Can we talk?" I almost deleted it. James and Ethan had a falling out when the business failed. Accusations, recriminations, threats of lawsuits. Ethan never spoke of him again, except in bitter asides. But something made me respond. Plaza Hotel Cafe, 4 p.m. today. The plaza sat on the edge of Forsyth Park, where Spanish moss hung from live oaks like gray ghosts. Its outdoor patio offered just enough privacy while still being public enough for safety. I arrived early, ordered black coffee that I wouldn't drink, and waited. James appeared precisely at 4, thinner than I remembered, his once meticulously groomed beard now slightly unkempt. He spotted me and hesitated before approaching, like a man unsure of his welcome. "Rachel," he said, sliding into the chair across from me. "You look—" "Don't," I cut him off. "Just say what you came to say." He nodded, accepting the boundary. "I heard about Diana, about what she's doing." I raised an eyebrow. "News travels fast in Savannah." "My wife still talks to Jocelyn," he admitted. "I wanted you to know they've been planning this for months." The coffee cup froze halfway to my lips. "What?" James leaned forward, voice low. "Diana hired a private investigator last year to look into your finances, your background. She was convinced you were, quote, after Ethan's inheritance." He let out a bitter laugh, as if there was much left after the company tanked. My mind raced back through the past year. The unexpected visits, Diana's questions about our finances, the way she'd inspect the house like she was taking inventory. "Why tell me this now?" I asked. "Because I was there when Ethan signed that postnup," James said simply. I stared at him. "You were the witness." He nodded. "The second one, your friend Angela, was the first. Ethan asked me right after he found out about his heart condition, said he didn't trust his mother not to try something if things went south." The world seemed to tilt slightly. "You knew about his heart?" "He swore me to secrecy," James said, guilt flickering across his face. "Said he didn't want to worry you until he had more information. Said the doctors told him it might be nothing, might be something. He wanted to be prepared either way." A cold knife of betrayal slid between my ribs. Ethan had kept his illness from me, confided in James instead. James, whom he claimed to despise. "I don't understand," I whispered. James reached into his messenger bag and pulled out a sealed envelope. "He asked me to give you this if anything ever happened to him. I should have brought it sooner, but I wasn't sure if—" He trailed off. "Well, I wasn't sure of anything anymore." I took the envelope, my name written across it in Ethan's handwriting. More secrets. More things he couldn't say to my face. "There's something else," James added, The business didn't fail because of bad investments. It failed because Ethan was sick. He started making erratic decisions, missing meetings. When I confronted him, he admitted he'd been having episodes, dizziness, memory lapses, the falling out, the accusations. It was all theater. He needed someone to blame for the collapse so you wouldn't suspect anything was wrong with him. The coffee shop around us continued its mundane rhythm. Baristas calling out orders, the hiss of steam wands, casual conversations, while my world crumbled anew. "Why?" I asked, my voice barely audible. "Why hide it from me?" James looked down at his untouched water. "He said you'd already given up your career to support his dreams. He couldn't bear to be another burden." I closed my eyes, remembering how I'd attributed his fatigue to stress, his memory lapses to overwork. How I'd believed his excuses because I wanted to. "Thank you for telling me," I finally said, gathering my purse and the envelope. "I need to go." James nodded. "Rachel, Diana knows about the heart condition too. She'll use it to challenge his mental state when he signed the postnup." Of course she would. Back at the motel, I sat cross-legged on the bed and carefully opened Ethan's letter. Inside was a single page of his familiar handwriting and a USB drive. "Rachel," it began, "if you're reading this, I'm gone, and I owe you more explanations than I can fit in one letter. First, forgive me for not telling you about my heart. By the time the diagnosis came, you'd already carried so much of my burden. I couldn't add this weight to your shoulders." The USB contains everything: medical records, financial documents, recordings of conversations with Mom. Yes, I recorded them. After the business failed and she offered to help, I knew her help would come with strings. She wanted me back under her roof, back under her control. When I refused, she threatened to contest anything I left to you if I died. So I made arrangements: the postnup, the refinanced mortgage, the recordings. Use them if you need to. Know that I loved you not despite your strength but because of it. In the end, I tried to protect you the only way I knew how, by making sure she couldn't take our home. All my love, for all time, E. I plugged the USB into my laptop with trembling hands. It contained exactly what he'd promised: medical files, financial records, and audio files labeled by date. I clicked on the most recent one from 3 months ago. Diana's voice filled the room. "This obsession with independence is childish, Ethan. Look at you. You're ill, your business failed, and you're too proud to come home." "This is my home," Ethan's voice replied, tired but firm. "With Rachel. That woman has never understood our family, our values. She's turned you against us. She's my wife." A dismissive scoff. "She's temporary. Family is forever. When you're gone, what then? Do you think she deserves what your father built? What should rightfully go to your sister's children?" "The house is Rachel's," Ethan stated flatly. "I've made sure of it." "We'll see about that," Diana said, her voice dropping to a dangerous purr. "Courts have overturned flimsier documents than whatever you think protects her." I stopped the recording, my chest tight. Here was proof. Diana had been planning this long before Ethan died. This wasn't grief-driven impulse. This was calculated. I called Angela immediately. "I have something you need to hear," I said without preamble. "And I think I know how to end this." The next 3 days passed in a blur of legal meetings and funeral preparations. I barely ate, barely slept. Angela worked tirelessly, filing motions, preparing responses to Diana's petition. The funeral was scheduled for Monday afternoon. I hadn't seen Diana since our confrontation in the motel parking lot, but I knew she'd be there. Ethan was her son, after all. Even our battle couldn't erase that bond. Monday morning dawned misty and mild, the air heavy with the scent of magnolias and rain-soaked earth. Typical Savannah. Beauty masking the rot beneath. I dressed carefully in a black dress Ethan had always loved, applied minimal makeup, and drove to St. Matthew's. The church was already half full when I arrived. Friends from college, neighbors, Ethan's remaining employees. They offered embraces, whispered condolences, awkward pats on my shoulder. I nodded, thanked them, moved through the motions like an actress who'd memorized her blocking but forgotten her lines. And then Diana swept in, Jocelyn at her side, both dressed in impeccable black, both wearing expressions of practiced grief. They hesitated when they saw me standing by the first pew, clearly surprised I hadn't barred them from the service. Diana recovered quickly, chin lifting as she approached. "Rachel." "Diana," I replied, my voice steady. "Jocelyn." An awkward silence stretched between us, the weight of our legal battle hanging unspoken. "I'm surprised to see you here," Diana finally said, unable to resist the dig. I smiled. Not warm, not cold, just present. "I'm his wife. This is where I belong." She flinched almost imperceptibly at the present tense. "Was," she corrected. "No," I replied softly. "Death doesn't change that relationship. It just changes its form." Diana's eyes narrowed, but before she could respond, the minister called us to our seats. The service began. Hymns, readings, eulogies. I didn't cry. I'd done my crying in private, away from Diana's hungry gaze. When it ended, when they lowered Ethan into the ground beneath a sprawling oak draped with Spanish moss, I placed a single, white rose on his casket and stepped back. Diana moved forward to do the same, then paused beside me. "This doesn't change anything," she murmured, just loudly enough for me to hear. "Actually," I replied, equally quiet, "it changes everything." The reading of the will, or rather, the confirmation that there was no will, took place in Angela's office the following morning. Diana and Jocelyn sat across from me, Mr. Langley at their side. Angela sat beside me, a thin folder open before her. "As you all know," Angela began, "Mr. Monroe did not leave a formal will. However, he did leave a legally binding postnuptial agreement that specifies all jointly owned assets, including the house at 1842 Abercorn Street, transfer to Mrs. Rachel Monroe upon his death." Mr. Langley cleared his throat. "We are contesting that document on the grounds that Mr. Monroe was not of sound mind when he signed it." Angela smiled pleasantly. "Yes, we received your petition, and we have prepared our response." She slid a document across the table. Mr. Langley picked it up, scanning it with increasing discomfort. "As you can see," Angela continued, "we have included Mr. Monroe's medical records, which indicate that while he had been diagnosed with a heart condition, his cognitive abilities were unimpaired at the time of signing. We've also included statements from both witnesses present, myself and Mr. James Harding." Diana's head snapped up at James's name. "James? Ethan hated him." "Actually," I said, speaking for the first time, "that was a facade. They maintained their friendship privately." Angela nodded. "Additionally, we have recordings that Mr. Monroe made of several conversations between himself and family members discussing the house and his wishes for it after his death." The color drained from Diana's face. "Recordings?" Angela pulled out a small recorder and pressed play. Diana's voice filled the room, clear and unmistakable. "Courts have overturned flimsier documents than whatever you think protects her." Mr. Langley held up a hand, signaling Angela to stop the recording. "Where did you get these?" "From Ethan," I answered simply. He knew what Diana was planning. He prepared for it. Diana's composure cracked. "This is absurd. You can't possibly—" "There's more," I interrupted. "The mortgage." Angela slid another document across the table. "The house was refinanced 2 years ago, solely in Mrs. Rachel Monroe's name. Mr. Monroe was removed from the deed at that time, making it her separate property. not joint property. Even without the postnup, the house belongs to Rachel. Diana snatched the paper, her hands shaking. This can't be right. Ethan would never. He did, I said quietly, when his business failed, to protect our home from creditors. I watched understanding dawn in her eyes, that even if she somehow invalidated the postnup, she still wouldn't get the house. That Ethan had outmaneuvered her from beyond the grave. Additionally, Angela continued, sliding one final document across the table, Mrs. Monroe is prepared to file a countersuit for unlawful entry, property damage, and emotional distress if this matter proceeds further. We have documented evidence of the unauthorized entry and removal of Mrs. Monroe's personal property from the home. Mr. Langley examined the papers with growing resignation. After a long moment, he leaned over and whispered something to Diana. Her face contorted with fury, but she gave a terse nod. We will need time to review these documents, he said stiffly. Of course, Angela replied. Take all the time you need. In the meantime, Mrs. Monroe will be returning to her home this afternoon. We expect all non-residents to have vacated the premises by 2 p.m. Diana stood abruptly, chair scraping against the hardwood floor. This isn't over. I met her gaze directly. Yes, Diana, it is. The house was empty when I returned that afternoon. The floral drapes had been taken down, but my white linen curtains were gone too. The garish pink pillow had vanished from my reading chair, along with several pieces of my wedding china. Small victories in their retreat. I walked through each room slowly, cataloging what remained and what was missing. Diana had taken what she could carry: photos of Ethan as a child, books he'd had since college, the antique clock his father had given him. Let her have them. They were objects, not memories. My memories of Ethan lived in the way sunlight hit the kitchen counter at exactly 7:15 a.m., in the loose floorboard by the bedroom door that he kept promising to fix, in the chip on the bathroom sink where he'd dropped his watch one sleepy morning. In Ethan's office, I found a single yellow sticky note stuck to his computer monitor. You won't keep it forever. D. I peeled it off, crumpled it in my palm, and let it fall into the wastebasket. Then I opened the windows, letting the warm Savannah breeze sweep through the house, carrying away the scent of Diana's perfume, the lingering tension of conflict. That evening, as twilight settled over the garden, I sat on the back porch with a glass of bourbon, Ethan's favorite, and pulled out the last letter from the envelope James had given me. I'd read only half of it that first night, too overwhelmed by revelations to continue. P.S. Ethan had written, In my desk drawer there's a small blue box. I meant to give it to you on our next anniversary. Consider it yours now. I found it, exactly where he said, tucked behind file folders in the bottom drawer. Inside was a silver charm bracelet with a single charm, a tiny house with an open door. I fastened it around my wrist, the cool metal warming against my skin, and raised my glass to the darkening sky. I'm home, Ethan, I whispered. I'm home. 3. Months later, I received a formal notice from Mr. Langley's office. Diana had withdrawn her petition. The house was legally, undisputedly mine. That same week, I found a buyer for Diana's antique sideboard, the one she'd forgotten in her hasty departure. I used the money to replant the garden with Ethan's favorite, camellias. In the end, Diana's biggest mistake wasn't changing my locks or claiming my house. It wasn't even underestimating me. Her biggest mistake was forgetting that Ethan knew her better than anyone. He'd grown up navigating her manipulations, calculating her moves 3 steps ahead. And in his final act of love, he'd taught me how to do the same. Some say grief is the price we pay for love. But for me, it became the forge that hardened something inside me, something I never knew I possessed until Diana tried to take it away. I still miss Ethan every day. The house still echoes with his absence. But it's mine now, truly, finally mine. And sometimes, in the quiet hours before dawn, I swear I can hear him laughing. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.